At Second City, we say we play to the height of the audience's intelligence. I go, my parents are now in the audience, so we can't have a scene where the summary is racism is bad. That is not playing to the height of my parents' intelligence. Like my parents who were alive and sat in segregated movie theaters. Like that's not good enough. And I remember even as a student being like, what is the point of this? Like what is your intention here? To remind us that racism is bad? You can do that on your own time.
Hey all, thanks for checking out Chicago Humanities Tapes. We are the audio extension of the live Chicago Humanities Spring and Fall Festivals. I'm your host, Elise Rosenthal, here to help you find the answers to humanity's biggest questions by bringing you the best of the live festivals. And hey, if you're in Chicago, check out some of our upcoming live events this spring 2025. Tickets are available now for ACLU President Deborah Ann Archer and former Executive Director of Human Rights Watch Kenneth Roth, plus great collaborations with the Old Town School of Folk Music and the Music Box Theater. Head to chicagohumanities.org for ticket information and to sign up for our email list, so you don't miss your favorite speaker the next time they're in town. Today's mini-episode is a best-of writer and performer Ali Barthwell from Last Week Tonight with John Oliver from October 2024's political comedy panel at Northwestern University. The panel is made up of some familiar voices, featuring Peter Grosz of the Colbert Report and Late Night with Seth Meyers, John Lutz of 30 Rock, Late Night with Seth Meyers, and Saturday Night Live, and is moderated by Second City's Kelly Leonard. Chicago's own Ali Barthwell's work has been featured in Vulture, the Chicago Tribune, and the AV Club. A former member of the Second City National Touring Company and the Cards Against Humanity Writers' Room, she shares war stories from the front lines of touring the country with Second City and the experience of being a Black voice in comedy writers' rooms.
I started touring in 2015. The beginning of 2015, and I left touring in August of 2016. So I got in, saw the tide, and was like, I gotta get the fuck out. And I remember we were writing material, and it was during 2016. It was a lot of there's too many Republicans. They keep entering the race. That was the tone. And then it became clear of oh, this is probably gonna be Trump. And I remember at a rehearsal, because there was sort of a sense of how do we make sure we talk about both parties and we want the show. And I was and I remember sitting in a rehearsal being can't we just say don't vote for this guy? Mm-hmm. Why can't we? We all believe this. Every single person in this room believes that no one should vote for this guy. And we were just the tone was from the director, just we can't do that. We just sort of can't do that. And I remember going to places that, you'd get there. There was one place that we went on tour, and they had something in there, in that they have a little thing of don't talk about this before you get there. And sometimes it's oh, there was a tragedy in the town. Don't talk about this tragedy. And we got somewhere in Michigan, and they go, don't mention the HOA. And we were what's going on with the HOA? So immediately we Googled the name of the town and HOA, and someone found out that they had to buy a house in the town, you had to join the HOA. To join the HOA, you had to be Christian. So they found this loophole that no one had, yes, correct face right in the front. And they vote on it every year in the town, local election. And the year we were there, it was 51-49 in favor. It was the most contentious close it had ever been. And so we would start a scene that was maybe a little political. I had a scene that I wrote about doing a 23andMe test, and I get my test back and I have 0% African ancestry. Brilliant. When I left it, never toured again. And we started the scene being hey guys, we all got our 23andMe, and we felt them be oh no, they know about the, we just kept feeling them be they know about the thing. And so there was just, we would go places and they would have a sense, the audience would sort of be we know that we shouldn't believe these things, or we know we shouldn't do these things, but we're gonna do them. And we had to sort of decide, are we gonna push and maybe have a bad show, or are we going to back off, or do we like let them know like, hey, this scene's about racial identity. It's not about your HOA. Like, relax. It's about race. You're good, all-white audience in northern Michigan. And so, like, there was a sort of, like, we were in this dance because I think a lot of people, like, it felt like something else is coming was sort of the tone a lot of the time on the road.
So you all write comedy in conversation with an audience. You did that when you're at Second City. It's how comedy gets written. And I'm curious, even now, you don't necessarily need to be in front of a live audience, right? You're reading the comments, or if you're a healthy person, you're not. But I'm curious for you, what are audiences saying to you now?
I mean, I find, and you all might be an example of this, that there's a bit of a screening before entering like a show, an event like this. I'm sure there's not a lot of closed-minded people that are stepping out on a Saturday afternoon in Evanston to the Chicago Humanities Festival who think that they're going to come ask me. Their question is to me is like, tell me about the space lasers you and your people are building. So, if
you should ask him though, because the answer is very interesting.
Yeah.
It's a good
I
answer.
believe we have a slide. No.
Yeah, exactly. So I find that like in person, the audiences are telling us we're a lot like you. In many ways. Online, you know, like receiving a comment or something, that is just a soup of death. Like there's no way to like figure out how to, you know, discern, because somebody could just be like a totally normal person walking around and then they get in their room and they type their like id into a computer.
Yeah. We have an audience that is rabid and so excited. And like the subreddit is so active, those little nerds, and they like want us to go further and talk about more. And when I joined the show, like I would get people like pitching me and they're like, you need to talk about this, and this is going on in my town. I'd be like, I legally can't look at these. Please stop sending me these. So you have people that are just like so excited and they want everything we talk about to work, and they get, you know, we get the reaction of like, we're not going far enough, we're not progressive enough, liberal enough. And then the other sort of interaction that I've had with the audience that was really stark, we wrote an episode about unemployment, the unemployment benefit, and I put in a joke about Elmo's mom, and I was like, we all know, we can all say it, Elmo is black, we all know that. And he is Elmo's black. He's one of us. And so I had a joke about Elmo's mom tying up her hair at night and this big run of like all her hair products. And there were like 70 black women that were like, who was at that show? Who taught him these words? Who did this? And so like they were just like, we've never seen this. Like this sounds different. It looks different.
It's coming out of a white British.
It's coming out of the whitest British guy, and like I was trying to give him notes of like, John, we don't say it that way, and he was like, I can't because I'll get in more trouble. But so like there is an awareness of like when the voice shifts a little, or when people hear something that sounds a little more like them or something different, and in that sort of representational way. And then the reaction from that was they had a pitch that someone had pitched about the Crown Act, about legislation to protect against discrimination for black hair. And they were like, oh, we have someone who can talk about this now. Like we can actually like write enough jokes to fill an episode. And so they came to me and were like, do you have interest in this? And I was like, sure. And then I just wrote a bunch of jokes about like being in the hair salon and like how long you're there, and like when your hairstylist leaves to like go get her lunch, and you're like, bitch, where's my? And then the reaction again of like, this sounds different. There's something happening here, and like the audience wanting to pinpoint and track along with the show of like, the people writing here are different, or they sound different, or something's happening behind the scenes that we're like not aware of. And like people were like, Black Lady John Oliver, and like got to me.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah.
That's how you can find you.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious. What's the line, and how does it change?
John, you go first.
So this is something we get from Lorne from SNL, is that it's got to be a fair hit. So even if it's going to offend people when we make a joke, if it's a fair hit on Trump or on, if it was a fair hit on Barack Obama, like if it's a fair hit on somebody, we're gonna go for it. But if there's times where it's just like we're just kind of making fun of a thing that's too we have to use better. We have to kind of take a little bit of a higher ground.
I used to write for Cards Against Humanity. I was a staff writer there. So the line is a fiction in a certain way. But we were like part of the reason that they brought on external writers, because when that game began, it was just like 4 or 5 dudes. And they brought on other writers. So they were like, we need to go back and examine things and bring in new voices and just like volume. But we had days where we would go through old cards and have to sit there and be like, why is this in the game? Like, why is this in the game? And we would have to go and play test. Like, you would find a group of people, you would bring them cards that had just been written or cards that were already in the game, and they would sit there and be like, no, I don't think this is funny, I don't get this. And sometimes you can like engage with it, but sometimes you're just like writing it down. But I remember there would be moments where we would write a card and then have to defend to the head writers or to the owners of like, yeah, we should print this. Like, this isn't offensive, this is just funny, or this is like a culturally relevant thing, but they had their kind of viewpoint on it, and it's like, I shouldn't have to explain to you why we should have a card that just says Denzel. Like, why am I going back and forth with you? Or like, just because you don't know who Shonda Rhimes is doesn't mean that that's not applicable. And then the other thing of like working at Last Week Tonight, I've had conversations with John of like, he has to say it. So there are things that like aren't the line for me, or things that I can get away with saying that I would say right now, but I won't because I don't want to end up on that. And but he said once, he was like, people come up to me on the street when I'm with my kids and like yell at me. And so there are things that he's like, I understand, or I know, or we've talked to some experts that like this is ground that we're like firm on. But understanding of like it is coming out of his mouth. He doesn't say like, Ali wrote this one, go tweet at her. Well, he says like, go yell. He's like, I'm not in New York. I live here. And so like he said, I'm with my kids and I don't want to get yelled at. And specifically like an episode we did about Israel and Gaza, he was just like, yeah, I don't want to get yelled at.
But to sit with that for a while was like, there were a lot of decisions clearly that were made. Like, we're only going this far here, we're only going this far here, but we are going to watch everything. I mean, the line, we touched on it. It's like, because I was thinking in terms of stand-up and these types of shows and Second City. Like, if you're a stand-up, like clearly Dave Chappelle thinks that their line is non-existent.
No, there's no line.
And there's no line.
So when I was touring, I really wanted to do the scene Baseball People. It's Edgar Blackman and Sam Richardson, if you know those two actors, and they explain like the racial dynamics of Chicago using the Cubs and the White Sox, and they say the Cubs are the N-words of baseball. And I had to stop myself for a second to actually say the word because I got so used to doing it. We did it on the road all the time. And we had to sit and be like, can we do this on the road? Mm-hmm. And we looked at, they give you a thing of like, if it's a this rated show, here's what you can say, here's what you can't say. And we realized the N-word's not on that list because they don't think anyone's ever going to say it. And so we were like, oh, we can do it. We had the debate of like, if we do a clean show where you can't go harder than like saying damn or hell, can we go all the way over here? And like we ultimately were like, in a clean show, we're asking to get a bad review, and that venue maybe doesn't come back. But if it's a show where we can say go all the way to saying fuck. It's like, yeah, we're gonna do it. And people would get offended and it would get weird. And we had to figure out also, it's a scene of, it's two men and I was playing a man's part, how to make it so that the scene would work with me as a woman. And we realized I had to smile the whole time.
Yeah.
Because if I got angry, the audience got weirder faster.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would do it how Edgar does it. If you watch it, he's like energetic, but he's not happy the whole time. And we had to figure out, I have to literally be like, man, fuck you, the whole time, because it wouldn't, and so it also, like we said,
She's
it's,
a black and a woman, and she's not happy. Well, that's just too much.
and so it's like, it's venue, it's the messenger, it's like, are we adapting something that works here? And then we have to, and we would have arguments of like, are there two other baseball teams that we could map this to? Like, what does the audience know about Chicago, know about the Cubs, know about the Sox? But like, there's all this like alchemy, but if it works, and you just have to run with that and not like analyze once you get it to work.
Exactly.
And I've talked about it like various places where I've worked at various stages, like parents kind of reminded me, I will remind the people that I'm working for of, at Second City we say we play to the height of the audience's intelligence. I go, my parents are now in the audience, so we can't have a scene where the summary is racism is bad. That is not playing to the height of my parents' intelligence. Like my parents who were alive and sat in segregated movie theaters. Like, that's not good enough. And I remember even as a student being like, what is the point of this? Like, what is your intention here? To remind us that racism is bad? You can do that on your own time. Go tell all the white people. We got other stuff to talk about.
That's right.
And and working at Last Week Tonight, sometimes we'll come across something. I said in like an end of the year meeting, I was like, yeah, can we have fewer clips of crying black people? Like, why? It's really hard to write a comedy show when the only time we see a black person in a video clip in our well-researched program, they are crying. And I was like, can we, if we're talking about racism or how racism has affected something, can we have a black expert as one of the talking heads? And it's like, and I will remind them, I go, my parents are now part of the audience. So if we're talking to the audience, what they know, what your writers know, like, my parents know there are black experts, and if they watch a show and there's no black experts, they're gonna be like, where the fuck are the black experts?
Yeah.
And so like, even in that intent in the audience, like understanding, it's like, how can we can push a line, we can talk about anything if we're meeting the audience like where they're at and like giving the benefit of the doubt that they know things, they are engaged, and they want you to like speak to their experience. And the step is realizing that like what that experience is probably more diverse, more interesting, more nuanced than is like the first assumption.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take your questions.
Do you still think there's an appetite for nuance within the audience, or is social media kind of like giving what the audience wants?
I think just like for my show or the show that I'm on, of like, yeah, we have 35 to 40 minutes. Like, if we don't do a nuanced show in 35 to 40 minutes, that's not a good show. And we structure it. I always joke like we're just writing like research papers with jokes. Like, that's basically my job. And so when you write a research paper, like if there are any college students present, it's like, I have to teach you this before I can get you to this. And then once I get you here, I can take you here, and then I can wrap it all up. But yeah, if I'm doing a blackout, there's not a lot of nuance because I just have to get you to laugh within 15 to 30 seconds, or it's broken. So I like how much, like the length of it, and also just like how much information am I trying to get to you will give more or less nuance sometimes.
What's a fair hit?
What's a fair hit?
When we say what's a fair hit, it means that person, like, that person had to do something that they were the one who did an action that then, we can ridicule this. It's punching up. It's not punching down. It's not looking, it's not going like, look at this dumb person, you look stupid. It's going, oh, look at this person, you're stupid.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, or sometimes you're like, we can, it's like, that you're not just making fun of somebody just so you can get a joke out, or like, well, we have to hit all sides. Like, if a Democrat does something that is frustrating or does something that is wrong, it's like, let's actually talk about like why that's wrong, as opposed to just being like, that's stupid. Like, if so, you're not just, or if it's like, you can make fun of, an example of like, Joe Biden is old. He's very old. There's no problem with being old. Like, that's not a fair hit. The problem is if you're a president and you maybe aren't giving people information about what is going on with your like mental and physical state, and you're not attending, like, those are all fair hits to be like, we should have a president that goes to all the stuff they're going to go to and tells the people what's going on. The unfair hit is like, old people smell like apricots. Like, that's not a fair hit.
I disagree, they do.
You guys had mentioned something about, obviously not a lot of closed-minded folks, probably a lot of open-minded folks here. And so when you're writing to mostly liberal audiences, how do you ensure that you're not pandering in your writing or, just saying the obvious thing for the easy laugh?
I mean, the easy laugh is also fun. Like, you can, because sometimes you need an easy laugh so that I can teach you something, so I can make you laugh a laugh that's slightly more difficult. Like, if you watch like certain Second City sketches that are more difficult or go to an emotional or dark place, they start pretty light. And so we gotta like get like if you watch Last Week Tonight, like the main story, they all start with like, here's a silly clip of this thing, like here's a commercial, a PSA from 1970, and we're like, that mime is weird, and then we're gonna talk about like complicated tax policy. So like, but you have to like so sometimes you pander because you're like, I need to warm you up so I can get you where I can like talk about something more difficult. And then, I don't know, personally, I'm also just like, I'm always writing from my perspective, and, there's not always people that share that perspective. So, like, the people that I'm pandering to, it's like a black lady that grew up in the Chicago suburbs. Like, there's maybe like 9 of us. So, so like, I'm fine if I'm pandering to the us's in the audience.
I also, on our show, I think it's like Seth is always looking for hard jokes. So he wants it to be funny. He does not want applause jokes. He doesn't want to get people going, yeah,
Clapper.
what you just
Clapter.
said. He wants to get a laugh. He wants it to be funny. And that's what he's always like, this needs more jokes.
And like sort of like the structure and the nature of a joke is always drawing like an in and an out. Like there's the nature of like that some people get a joke and some people don't. And I was talking to a friend and I was like, the joke that like everyone laughs at is probably like not a really good joke. It's like, oh man, waking up in the morning, am I right? Like that's a joke. But then like there's always one person in the back that's like, fuck you, I work nights.
That was Ali Barthwell, Peter Grosz, John Lutz, and Kelly Leonard, recorded live at the Chicago Humanities Fall Festival at Northwestern University in 2024. To check out more of these very funny folks, head to the show notes or chicagohumanities.org. Chicago Humanities Tapes is produced and hosted by me, Elisa Rosenthal, with help from the hardworking staff over at Chicago Humanities who are producing the live events and making them sound great. If you've been enjoying our programming, the best way to support the podcast is to leave a rating and review. Click subscribe to be notified about new episodes, and scroll through previous episodes for a gem you might have missed. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another new episode for you. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay human.